Rain poured from the sky like a broken faucet. The schoolyard was empty, except for a group of teenagers standing near the football field. Their voices echoed in the cold, wet air. They were laughing, shouting, pointing at someone on the ground. In the center of the circle stood Emma, a quiet 15-year-old girl. Her hair was soaked. Her glasses were slipping off her nose, and her clothes were muddy. She looked small compared to the others. She didn't speak, didn't fight back, just stood there, trembling. "Come on, freak," one of the girls sneered. Pushing her from behind, Emma stumbled forward and slipped, falling straight into the mud. A loud splash followed, and the group erupted in laughter. "Take a picture," a boy said, pulling out his phone. Another girl was already recording. "Wait till everyone sees this on Instagram," someone added. Emma didn't cry out, she just lay there. Her hands pressed into the mud. Her breath was shaky, her heart was pounding. She felt the cold seep into her skin. But the shame burned hotter. From a distance, sitting in an old gray pickup truck, a man watched. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. His name was Jack Monroe, a retired Navy SEAL. He was also Emma's father. Jack had seen war. He had been shot at, ambushed, and nearly killed in combat. But nothing hurt more than watching his daughter get humiliated. Again and again he had tried to stay away, thinking Emma would tell him if something was wrong. She never did. She came home every day with fake smiles and fake stories until yesterday, when he found a torn hoodie in the trash and bruises on her arms. Now he was here, watching it happen for himself. His training told him to act with precision. Not rage, but his heart wanted to storm out. Pick those kids up and throw them into the mud instead. Not yet, he whispered to himself. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a father. And this wasn't a battlefield, it was worse. It was high school. Emma slowly got up from the mud. Her hands trembled, but she didn't look at anyone. She just wiped her face and began walking toward the building. Her backpack was soaked. Her clothes clung to her skin, and her shoes squelched with every step. The bullies walked away, laughing and joking like nothing had happened. No one stopped them, no teachers came, no friends helped her. Jack started the truck and followed Emma from a distance. He didn't want to scare her or make it worse, but something inside him had already changed. That night at home, Emma didn't say much. She took a long shower and went to her room without dinner. Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring at his old seal metal box. It had been years since he opened it. He finally stood up, opened the wooden box, and looked at the medals, photos, and journals from his time in the Navy. He remembered the promise he made when Emma was born, to protect her with everything I've got. He had been protecting others for decades, but now it was time to protect her in a way that counted. Later that night, Jack knocked gently on Emma's door. She didn't answer. He opened it anyway, finding her lying on the bed. Wrapped in a blanket, her eyes were red from crying. But her face was calm. He sat down beside her, not saying anything at first. Then in a soft voice he asked, "Want to tell me what happened today?" Emma didn't speak, just shook her head. "It's been going on a while, hasn't it?" He added, a pause, then a small nod. Jack didn't ask who or why he had seen it. He already knew. Instead, he said, "Emma, I know what it feels like to be pushed down, to be surrounded, to feel like you have no way out." She looked at him surprised. "But I also know what it takes to stand up again," he said. Emma whispered, "I don't want to go back." "I know," Jack said. "But you will." Emma's eyes filled with fear. "But this time," he continued, "you won't be alone." He stood up and walked to the hallway. Before leaving, he turned and said, "Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., Emma blinked. "Confused? For what?" she asked. Jack smiled slightly. "Training." The sky was still dark when the alarm buzzed. Emma groaned and pulled the blanket over her head. She had barely slept, her muscles ached, and the memory of yesterday still sat heavy in her chest. A knock came at the door, followed by her father's voice. "Time to get up, kid." She didn't move. 5 minutes, he added, then walked away. Emma stared at the ceiling. She wasn't sure what he meant by training. She wasn't strong, she wasn't brave. She was just a girl who got pushed in the mud while the world watched and laughed. But something in Jack's voice last night had felt different. Not angry, not pitying, just steady. She slowly sat up and got dressed. Still unsure why, in the backyard Jack was already waiting. He wore a plain gray hoodie, boots, and a serious look on his face. In front of him were 2 backpacks filled with water bottles and something heavy. "Put that on," he said, handing one to her. Emma blinked. "It's heavy," Jack nodded. "That's the point." They started walking. Then jogging, Emma's legs burned quickly, her breath short and fast. They reached the end of the street and turned onto a forest trail. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, panting. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Back when I was training for the SEALs, they called this kind of run a warm-up." Emma gave him a tired look. "This is a warm-up?" she asked. Jack smirked. "You'll get used to it." By the time they returned home, Emma was exhausted. She dropped the backpack on the porch and sat down on the steps. Her face was red, her legs shaky, but deep down, a small spark had lit inside her. She didn't quit. She finished over breakfast. Jack finally spoke more. "I wasn't always like this," he said. Stirring his coffee, Emma raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He looked at her. Strong, disciplined, calm under pressure. She waited as he continued. "In the Navy, we had to earn every step," he said. "Pain was our teacher and failure was always watching." He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old photo. It showed a younger Jack, dressed in desert gear, standing beside a helicopter, Afghanistan. 2008, he said. "Hot, loud, and full of things that wanted to kill us." Emma looked closer, seeing the lines on his face even back then. "But the worst battles weren't out there," Jack continued. "They were in here." He tapped his temple. After the mission, Jack had come home a hero, but inside he was broken. Nightmares, anger, guilt. He buried it all to be a good father, but over time, that silence built a wall between him and Emma. "I thought keeping you safe meant keeping you away from my world," he admitted. "But I see now that was a mistake." Emma listened in silence. She had always seen her father as strong, almost distant, but now, he seemed human, vulnerable, and more real than ever. The next few days followed the same pattern. Early morning runs, strength training, focus drills. Jack taught Emma how to control her breath under stress, how to stay alert in a crowd, how to use words and body language to defend space without violence. One morning, he blindfolded her and asked her to walk through the backyard without hitting anything. She laughed. "You're joking." He shook his head. "Your enemies won't always come from the front." She stumbled and fell. But each time she got back up in the evenings, they talked, sometimes about training, sometimes about life. Jack told her about his teammates, men he lost, and those who made it home. Emma shared things she had never said aloud. How the bullying started in 7th grade. How each day she wished someone would notice. "Or care, you were always quiet," Jack said. Emma replied, "I thought being quiet kept me safe." He nodded. "Silence is only safe until someone decides to fill it with their noise." One night, Jack brought out a faded Navy SEAL training journal. The cover was worn, the pages filled with notes, sweat stains, and hand-drawn maps. "This saved my life more than once," he said. Handing it to her, Emma flipped through it, seeing lessons written in bold. "Pain is temporary. Calm is a weapon. Never be the loudest voice, be the stillest." On the final page, one sentence was written in red ink. "Protect what matters, even if it's yourself." Emma read it 3 times that night. She placed the journal beside her bed like a shield. At school, things hadn't changed much yet. The bullies still laughed in the hallways. One of them whispered "Swamp Girl" when she passed. But Emma didn't react. She held her breath, counted 3 seconds, then kept walking. Inside, she felt something growing. Not rage, but control. She was learning how to own the space around her. Not through fists, but through presence. At lunch, she sat alone as usual, but she sat straighter. She watched people the way Jack taught her. Study patterns, notice fear, detect weakness, and she saw something she never noticed before. The bullies weren't strong. They were afraid of losing power, afraid of being exposed. She smiled to herself. Not because she wanted revenge, but because for the first time, she saw the truth. That evening, Jack handed her a small box. Inside was a simple necklace with a charm shaped like a compass. He said, "This isn't about finding direction. It's about never forgetting where you came from." Emma held it tightly. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. The storm in her life wasn't over, but now she had boots on her feet, strength in her legs, and a map in her mind. She was no longer a victim. She was becoming something else, something stronger, something unstoppable. The air was colder now. Autumn had crept in, painting the trees in orange and gold. Each morning the grass sparkled with dew, and the ground crunched beneath their boots. Emma had stopped complaining about the early mornings. She didn't even need the alarm clock anymore. Jack noticed the change in her eyes first. There was focus now. She didn't look down when people passed. She didn't flinch at every sound. Instead, she watched the world like a quiet hawk. They trained in silence most days. Jack taught her to let her mind go still. "Noise is the enemy," he said, walking beside her through the woods. "The more you panic, the less you see." Emma listened, breathing slowly, counting her steps in her head. They practiced awareness drills, how to sense movement behind her, how to walk without making sound, how to hear the difference between footsteps and wind. Sometimes Jack would disappear into the trees, then jump out, testing her reflexes. She screamed the first time. By the fifth time, she had already turned before he moved. In school, Emma was still the quiet girl, but now her silence felt different. Before, it had been fear. Now it was steel. She didn't answer insults with insults. She answered with eyes that didn't blink. In English class, a boy tried to pull her chair out as she sat down. She didn't fall. She caught herself, turned, and looked him dead in the eyes. She didn't yell, didn't cry, just said, "Do that again and you'll find out who trained me." He laughed nervously, then backed away. Jack noticed it too. When Emma came home, she walked taller. She had bruises on her arms, but from training, not bullying. He started pushing her harder, adding weights, longer runs, breath-hold exercises underwater. One night, she swam laps in the cold lake behind their house without a wetsuit. Jack stood on the shore, watching her slice through the water like a blade. He smiled, but deep inside he also worried. Not because she was weak, but because she was becoming too good at hiding pain. Just like he used to that night, they sat by the fireplace, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea. Emma looked at the flames, then asked, "Did they ever break you?" Jack raised his eyebrows. "Who?" "The people who tried to," she said. Softly, he paused, his eyes distant. "There were moments," he admitted. "Moments I thought I couldn't take it. But then I'd hear your voice, even when you were little," he said. "It kept me alive." Emma looked at him, surprised. "I didn't even know you thought about me when you were away." Jack gave a sad smile. "I thought of nothing else." The next morning, Emma woke up early and set up their training space before Jack came outside. She had drawn chalk lines on the ground for balance drills, laid out their gear, even made protein shakes. Jack stepped outside, looked at it all, and chuckled. "You trying to take over my job?" Emma grinned. "Just trying to keep up." One afternoon at school, she saw a girl named Lily crying in the hallway. Lily had also been targeted by the bullies, mostly silent attacks. Cruel rumors, fake texts. Emma didn't say much. She just sat beside her and handed her a chocolate bar from her bag. They didn't speak, but when Emma stood up, Lily whispered, "Thanks." Later that day, one of the main bullies, Tyler, cornered Emma near the library. He stepped too close, arms crossed, voice low. "You think you're tough now?" he hissed. Emma didn't step back. She met his eyes and replied, "I don't think I'm anything. I just know who I am," Tyler smirked. "Still just the muddy loser." Emma didn't flinch. She leaned closer and said calmly, "Careful, Tyler. You're not the only one who knows how to fight anymore." He blinked. Confused, she walked away. Not with fear, but with purpose. The silence she left behind was louder than any scream. That evening, Jack watched her enter the house. She moved like a soldier, calm, alert, grounded. He handed her a folder. Inside were old SEAL training pages, obstacle course layouts, mental tests, breathing drills. "These are yours now," he said. "You've earned them." Emma flipped through the pages with care. "I'm not trying to be a soldier," she said, Jack replied. "You're not. You're becoming something better, a protector." That night, Jack had a dream. He was back in the desert, bullets flying, smoke in the air, but this time Emma was there beside him, calm, leading others through danger. He woke up sweating and realized he wasn't training her to survive anymore. She was becoming someone who could lead others out of darkness. The next morning, Emma placed something on the kitchen table. It was her old muddy backpack, the one from the day she was pushed. She had cleaned it, patched the torn straps, and filled it with books, snacks, and first aid supplies. Jack looked at it, puzzled. Emma said, "It's for someone else now," he asked. "Who?" She replied, "Whoever needs it next." Jack nodded. Deeply moved, the girl who once cried silently in the mud now stood ready to lift others. She wasn't just steel and silence, she was light in the dark, and her mission was just beginning. The mornings were darker now. The sun took its time to rise, and the wind cut through the trees like a warning. But Emma didn't slow down. She had become a shadow in motion, quiet, alert, and stronger than ever. Jack watched her from the porch as she completed a sprint drill circuit around the backyard. She jumped over logs, crawled under ropes, and climbed a wooden wall they had built together. "Again," Jack called out. Emma didn't answer. She just turned and ran back to the starting point. Jack was no longer testing her limits, she was setting them herself. And surpassing them later over breakfast. Jack placed an old black notebook on the table. Its cover was scratched, the pages yellow. "What's this?" Emma asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. Jack said, "It's from SEAL field training, urban survival, group psychology, mind games." Emma opened it, seeing short, sharp notes. "Control the environment before it controls you. Never show all your skills at once. Power in silence. Defense and strategy." Jack pointed to the second page. "This week," he said, "we move beyond the body, we train the mind." That evening, Jack gave her the first lesson. He stood in the middle of the living room and said nothing. Emma tilted her head, waiting. "Your mission," he finally said, "is to get me to move." She frowned. "Like, make you flinch?" He nodded. "Without touching me." Emma tried talking, staring, even tossing a ball past him. Jack didn't move. After 20 minutes, she gave up. Jack smiled. "Lesson 1. Don't play the game on their terms." Emma blinked, then grinned slowly. She was starting to get it at school. Emma began using her new skills quietly. She studied how students moved, who led the conversations, who followed. She watched how the bullies walked, always in groups, always laughing loud, always looking for someone weaker, but now, they didn't look at her the same way. She didn't fight back with fists. She used presence, eye contact, silence. They'd insult her, but she'd tilt her head and just stare. Long enough to make them uncomfortable, then she'd walk away. Word started to spread. Emma Monroe wasn't afraid anymore. One day during gym class, the coach was called away. The moment he left, Tyler, the ringleader, smirked and tossed a basketball hard at a smaller kid named Ryan. The ball hit Ryan in the face. Knocking off his glasses, the group laughed. Emma stepped forward slowly. She picked up the ball and handed it back to Ryan, then turned to Tyler, calm as ever. "You think that makes you powerful?" she asked. Tyler stepped closer. "Back off, freak." Emma didn't flinch. "Don't confuse fear with respect," she said quietly. The gym had gone silent. Tyler didn't reply. He turned and walked away, mumbling something. But everyone saw it. He backed down. Emma turned to Ryan and helped him up. "Thanks," he whispered. She nodded. "You okay?" Ryan smiled a little. "Yeah." That night, Emma told Jack what happened. He listened carefully, then said, "You did more than defend him. You showed the others what leadership looks like." From that day, Jack adjusted her training, less physical, more tactical. He gave her people puzzles, scenarios to study from school. He taught her how to turn questions back on attackers, how to expose manipulation without causing a fight. At school, Emma began helping others quietly. She'd warned students about tricks the bullies were planning. She left notes in lockers telling victims they weren't alone. She even stood near kids who looked scared, just so the bullies would think twice, but Emma never bragged. Never posted anything. She stayed silent, sharp and watchful. Her goal wasn't attention, it was protection. One Friday afternoon, Jack surprised her with a trip to the local fire department. Emma raised an eyebrow as they walked into the station. "We're learning from real pros today," Jack said. A firefighter named Maria greeted them, strong and kind. She showed Emma how they trained for emergencies, fires, floods, rescues, panic crowds. "Half the job," Maria said, "is staying calm when everyone else isn't." Emma listened closely, absorbing every word. They practiced how to guide people during chaos, how to use body language to gain trust quickly. Maria even taught her how to use her voice, not loud, but firm, clear, direct. Emma thanked her with a quiet smile. Jack saw something in her that day. She wasn't just reacting anymore, she was planning, preparing, thinking like a leader. Back at school, something new happened. A younger girl named Nora approached Emma at lunch. She sat down slowly and said, "They're planning something on Monday, a prank during the science fair." Emma leaned in. "Who told you?" Nora hesitated. "They wanted me to help, but I said no." Emma nodded. "You did the right thing." That evening, Jack and Emma reviewed the floor plan of the school science fair. They studied where the prank could happen, how to intercept it, and how to alert teachers without causing panic. Jack handed her a small notebook. "Your first field op," he said. Smiling, Emma took it proudly. On Monday, Emma walked through the school halls like usual. but her eyes scanned everything. She spotted Tyler and his group near the project booths laughing too loudly. Then she saw it, a bucket tied above the entrance to the biology room connected to a string. She followed the string and quietly untied it when no one was looking, then found the teacher and casually mentioned where to stand for a better view. Minutes later, the principal appeared, saw the prank set up, and called Tyler aside. The prank failed and no one got hurt, but more importantly, students began whispering that Emma had saved the day. She never admitted it. She just smiled and walked away. Later in the backyard, Jack handed her an old military patch. It read, "Calm under fire." Emma looked at it, wide-eyed. "I didn't earn this," she said. Jack placed it in her hand. "Yes, you did." She pinned it to her backpack, the same one that once carried mud, shame and silence. Now it carried strength, purpose and pride. Emma was no longer just surviving school. She was shaping it one quiet move at a time. Monday morning came with a strange quiet. The air felt heavy, like something was about to happen. Emma walked into school with steady steps, her backpack light but her mind sharp. She could sense it in the hallways, nervous glances, whispers. Too many people looking at their phones. Jack had taught her about this kind of energy. The quiet before the storm, he called it. Listen to what's not being said. Emma moved through the crowd with calm eyes. She spotted Tyler and his group gathered by the lockers, whispering and smirking. They weren't looking at her. Not directly, but every now and then. One of them would glance her way. Something was coming. And it wasn't aimed at her this time. That's what made it worse. At lunch, Emma sat at her usual table. She opened her water bottle and quietly watched the cafeteria. Nora sat down across from her looking nervous. They're planning something big, she whispered. Who? Emma asked, though she already knew Tyler and his friends. Nora said, They said it's payback for last week. Emma's stomach tightened. Last week's failed prank had embarrassed them. Even got Tyler suspended for 2 days. Now they were back and angry. Who's the target? Emma asked. Nora hesitated, then whispered, Lily. Emma froze. Lily, the same girl who had once cried in the hallway. The one Emma had helped without saying much. The one who had slowly started smiling again. What kind of prank? Emma asked, voice low. They said they're going to dump paint on her during her presentation, Nora replied. Emma clenched her jaw. It was cruel. But more than that, it was public, humiliating, and meant to break someone's spirit. Jack's voice echoed in her mind. When someone sets a trap, don't walk around it, disable it, she nodded once. Thank you, Nora, she said. Stay away from them today, okay? Nora nodded quickly and left. Emma stood up, zipped her bag, and walked to the science fair hallway. It was already decorated with student projects, colorful boards. Models and posters lined the walls. She scanned everything, every doorway, every vent, every overhead shelf. Then she saw it, above the ceiling tiles near Lily's table. There was a thin rope dangling just out of sight. Emma walked away, found a janitor she trusted, and asked if she could help fix a loose display. Together, they opened the ceiling tile and found a bucket of red paint tied with fishing line. The janitor gasped. Emma said, Can you take this down and keep it somewhere safe? He nodded and carried it away without questions. She then took out her small notepad and scribbled a note. It read, They plan to humiliate a student with paint. Proof is removed. Safety is restored. She folded it and slid it under the principal's office door. Then she waited. The bell rang and students poured into the hall for the science fair. Lily stood at her table, nervous but excited. Tyler and his crew were nearby, pretending to admire another project. But Emma could see it in their eyes. They were waiting for the moment when nothing happened. Confusion settled on their faces. Tyler looked up, saw the empty ceiling tile, and went pale. Emma walked up behind him and whispered, Looking for something? He spun around, startled. You... He began, but stopped. Emma didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She just said, I'm done letting people like you win. He tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. Then the principal stepped into the hallway. Holding the folded note, his eyes locked onto Tyler. You three office, he said firmly as they were led away. Students around the hall started clapping, soft at first. Then louder. Lily turned to Emma, confused. Did you... Emma nodded, Lily's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Emma replied. We look out for each other now. That evening, Emma told Jack everything. He listened, arms crossed, leaning against the kitchen counter. You handled it perfectly, he said. No violence. No drama, just strategy. Emma looked up at him. I didn't feel scared this time, Jack nodded. That's because fear has nothing to hold on to anymore. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small fabric patch. It had a quiet symbol, a wolf with eyes closed. This is the ghost patch, Jack said, in the field. It was given to those who could take down threats without being seen. Emma reached out slowly. You earned it today, Jack said. You protected someone else while staying in the shadows. She took the patch and stared at it for a long moment, then pinned it to her wall next to the others. That night, she lay in bed with the window slightly open. The wind rustled the leaves outside, but she felt calm, not because the danger was gone, but because she knew how to meet it now. The next morning as she walked to school, students nodded at her. Some smiled, others whispered. She didn't react much. She didn't need applause. She only needed to know one thing, that she was no longer powerless. In class, Lily passed her a folded note. It said, "You made me feel safe again." Emma folded it and placed it in her bag. Safe like the compass necklace, like the old journal from her dad. Like every memory she now carried as armor. At home, Jack placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You're ready for what's next?" Emma turned, curious. What is next? Jack looked toward the horizon beyond the window. Sometimes, he said, when you stand up tall, the past comes looking for you. Emma tilted her head. What do you mean? He didn't answer, but the way he stared out told her. Something was coming. Something not from her world, but from his. The sky was gray again. Rain tapped gently on the windows as Emma sat by the fireplace. She sipped warm tea, her boots drying near the door. The world outside felt calm, but her father's words from the night before still echoed in her mind. Sometimes when you stand up tall, the past comes looking for you. Jack hadn't explained what he meant, but she could see it in his eyes. It wasn't fear, just caution. The kind of caution you carry when you've lived through things others wouldn't believe. That morning, Jack sat at the kitchen table with an old photo in his hands. It showed 3 men in dusty uniforms. Standing in front of a helicopter, Jack was one of them. The other 2 were strangers to Emma, but something about the photo felt heavy, like it carried more than just memories. She sat down beside him. Who are they? She asked. Jack tapped the man on the right. His name was Mason, he said. We trained together. Deployed together, he paused, but one day, I found out he wasn't who I thought he was. Emma waited silently. Jack continued. He was selling intel, military secrets. To private groups, I reported him, he said. Voice flat. He lost everything. His rank, his pension, his reputation. But he didn't go quietly. Emma stared at the photo. Do you think he's coming? She asked. Jack didn't answer directly. He just said, people like Mason don't forget. Later that day, a black SUV parked across the street. The engine stayed on, windows tinted. Emma noticed it right away. Jack stepped out onto the porch and stared at it. After a minute, the SUV drove off. That evening, Jack double-checked all the locks. He dusted off an old box from the closet. Inside was a radio, a flashlight, and a folder marked "In case of contact." Emma watched quietly from the doorway. She wasn't afraid, not anymore, but she was alert, prepared. The next morning at school, everything seemed normal. Students talked about exams, projects, and the weekend dance, but something felt off. Emma's instincts buzzed like a quiet alarm. During lunch, a new man stood near the school's front office. He wore a dark coat, clean shoes, and carried a briefcase. He wasn't a teacher, not a parent. His eyes scanned the halls too carefully, too professionally. Emma slipped into the library and called Jack. Dad, she said. I think he's here. Jack's voice was steady. Stay calm, he said. I'll be there in 5. Exactly 4 minutes later, Jack's truck pulled up outside. He walked into the school like a soldier returning to familiar ground. He locked eyes with the man in the coat. They didn't speak, but everything passed between them in that look. The man stepped forward. Extending his hand, Jack Monroe, he said. Jack didn't shake it, Mason, he replied. Coldly, what do you want? Mason smiled, too calmly. Just wanted to say hello, he said. See how life turned out for the man who ruined mine. Emma watched from behind a bookshelf. She could feel the weight between the 2 men. Like 2 storms ready to collide, Jack didn't flinch. You made your choices, he said, and I made mine. Mason leaned closer. You always did think you were the hero, Jack said nothing. Mason chuckled. Enjoy your peaceful little life, Jack. But peace doesn't last. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing like smoke into the rain. That night, Emma and Jack sat in the living room, silent. A fire crackled softly. "He's not done," Jack said quietly. "But neither are we," Emma nodded. "What do we do now?" she asked. Jack looked at her. "Now we remind ourselves who we are." He stood and walked into the garage. When he returned, he was carrying a small wooden box. He set it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were medals, patches, and folded papers. Jack lifted one medal and placed it in Emma's hand. It was round, golden, with an eagle carved into the center. "I received this after my final mission," he said. "Not for shooting, not for fighting, but for saving lives." Emma stared at it. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jack nodded. "I kept it hidden for a long time, because I thought I didn't deserve it. I was wrong." He reached into the box again and pulled out something else. Emma's muddy backpack from weeks ago. It was clean now, patched, and stronger than before. He handed it to her. "You were thrown down in this," he said, "but you stood back up." Emma took the backpack in one hand and the medal in the other. Her voice shook slightly. "I don't want to fight people like Mason." Jack looked at her with soft eyes. "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to keep showing the world a better way." At school the next day, Emma walked through the halls wearing the same backpack. But this time it had something new pinned on the strap. The medal. Not for glory, not for attention, but for truth. A girl stopped her near the lockers. "You're the one who helped Lily, right?" Emma nodded. "My brother's being bullied," the girl said. Eyes low, Emma smiled gently. "Tell me his name." That evening, Jack stood on the porch and watched the sunset. Emma joined him, sipping cocoa. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Are we safe?" she asked. Jack looked out at the quiet street. "For now," he said. "But if the storm comes back, we'll be ready, together." They watched the light fade, but there was no fear. Only stillness, only steel, only love that had walked through fire and come out stronger. The past had knocked, but it didn't break the door down, because what waited behind it was no longer weak. No longer wounded, it was Emma standing tall, wearing her story like armor, and carrying her strength in silence. The air was still. Autumn leaves fell gently from the trees, dancing across the ground like soft memories. Emma sat on the porch steps, tying her boots. She looked up at the sky. It was clear, but something inside her said the storm wasn't over. Jack came outside holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to Emma and sat beside her. They didn't speak right away. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was strong, like a bridge built through fire. "He's still out there," Emma said quietly. Jack nodded. "I know." Mason had vanished after their confrontation at the school. But Jack knew his type. Calculated, patient, never truly finished. "Guys like him don't strike when you expect it," Jack said. "They wait, watch, then find your weakness." Emma took a slow breath. "I'm not afraid of him," she said. "I know," Jack replied, "but I am." He added softly, "Afraid he'll use you to get to me." She looked at him, steady and calm. "Then we don't give him anything to use," she said. Jack smiled, not because he felt safe, but because he felt proud. That evening, they drove out to the edge of town. Jack wanted to show her something. They stopped at an old, quiet cabin surrounded by trees. "This is where my team used to train off the grid," he said. Emma looked around, feeling the weight of memories in the air. Inside, the walls were covered in old maps, photos, mission plans, and training targets. Jack dusted off a metal box and opened it, revealing a folded American flag, a compass, and a worn leather notebook. "This," he said, handing her the notebook, "was my mission log." Emma opened it gently. Every page was filled with notes from real missions, coordinates, rescue plans, enemy movements. Decisions made under pressure. On the last page, one line stood out in bold ink. "Leadership isn't about being the strongest. It's about protecting the ones who can't protect themselves." Emma closed the book slowly. "I think I understand now," she said. "It's not just about strength or silence. It's about using what we've been through to lift others." That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He paced the living room, looking out the window every few minutes. Then, just after midnight, a message buzzed on his old military phone. It read, "Meet me. One last time alone." Emma saw the message too. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm coming with you," she said. Jack shook his head. "No, Em. This one's on me." Emma didn't argue. Instead, she picked up her compass necklace and handed it to him. "So you don't lose your way," she whispered. Jack drove alone to the abandoned train yard on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, lit only by flickering street lamps and the moon above. Mason stood near one of the cargo containers, arms folded, coat blowing in the wind. "I knew you'd come," Mason said. Jack stopped a few feet away. "You always liked games," he replied. Mason chuckled. "This isn't a game, Jack. This is closure." He pulled out a small envelope and tossed it on the ground. Jack picked it up, opened it, and saw photos of Emma, walking to school, sitting in class at the science fair. His jaw tightened. "You've been watching her," he growled. Mason shrugged. "You took my future," he said. "I figured I'd visit yours." Jack stepped closer. "Whatever grudge you have is with me," he said. "Leave her out of it." Mason smirked. "You always protected the weak. Still think that's strength?" Jack's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "No," he said, "I think it's power." Behind them, headlights flashed. A truck pulled up slowly. Emma was driving. She stepped out without fear. "I told you I'm not afraid," she said to Mason. "I'm not hiding anymore." Mason looked from Jack to Emma, confused. "You brought her?" he said. Jack nodded. "She's not just my daughter," he said. "She's the proof that people like you don't win." Mason's hands curled into fists. Emma didn't move. "I used to be afraid of people like you," she said. "But now I know your secret. You need fear to feel powerful. But I don't give you that anymore." Police sirens echoed in the distance. Emma had already alerted them before they left. Mason's eyes widened. "You planned this?" Emma smiled. "We don't play by your rules anymore." Officers arrived and arrested Mason without resistance. He didn't speak, didn't look back, just stared at the ground. Finally defeated as the car drove away, Jack turned to Emma. "You did that," he said. Emma shook her head. "We did," she replied. Back at school, things began to change. Word spread about what happened, though the full story was never told. Students started looking at Emma differently, not with fear, but with respect, and not because she fought back, but because she stood for something bigger. That Friday, the school held a special assembly. The principal invited Jack and Emma to speak. Jack stood first, his voice steady. "I served my country with honor," he said, "but my proudest mission was becoming a father." Then Emma stepped forward. She looked out at the students, the teachers, the people who once laughed, and she said, "You don't have to be a Navy SEAL to be brave. You don't need a medal to protect someone. You just have to decide that enough is enough." The auditorium was silent, not out of fear, but out of awe. Later that night, Jack and Emma stood in the backyard. Stars twinkled above them and the wind was soft. Jack handed her a final patch. It read, "Honor through action." Emma held it close. "I'll wear it," she said, "but not just for me. For everyone who feels invisible." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've become more than I ever dreamed," he said. Emma smiled. "I had a good teacher." They stood in silence as the wind carried the last of the autumn leaves through the night. No longer shadows, no longer victims, just two warriors, bound not by blood but by courage, the kind of courage that rises again and again, even from the mud. The snow had started falling. Tiny white flakes danced through the morning light as Emma stepped outside. The world was quieter now, but her mind was full. A new kind of restlessness stirred in her chest. It had been a month since Mason was arrested. A month since Emma stood on stage and told her truth. The bullies had backed off. Her name was now spoken with respect, not fear. But something inside her knew. It wasn't over. Not really. Because now people were looking at her differently. Not as a victim, not even as a fighter, but as a leader. One afternoon, the school principal asked Emma to stay after class. He closed the door gently and handed her a folder. "We're starting a student support group," he said, "for kids who've been bullied, isolated, or feel unsafe." Emma opened the folder. Inside was a simple flyer, "Stronger Together," led by Emma Monroe. She froze. "Me?" she asked. The principal smiled. "You're already leading." "Emma, this just makes it official." She walked home that day with the folder pressed tightly to her chest. Jack was waiting in the kitchen when she got in. She held up the flyer and said nothing. Just placed it on the table. Jack read it and nodded slowly. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. Emma looked him in the eyes. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know it matters." That night they made a plan. Jack helped her design a simple workshop. Lessons in awareness, confidence, boundary setting, and emotional control. Not military drills, but life tools. Emma wanted every student who joined to leave feeling stronger, not just physically, but inside. The first meeting was quiet. Only 3 students showed up. Nora was one of them, so was Ryan, the boy from the gym, and a tall boy named Ezra, who barely spoke and never looked people in the eye. They sat in a circle in the library's side room. Emma introduced herself with a simple sentence. "I'm not here to fix you," she said. "I'm here to remind you what's already inside you." They didn't say much at first, but they listened. And when Emma shared her story, not the public version, but the quiet moments, the mud, the fear, the guilt, they started to open up too. Each week the group grew. 6 people, then 10, then 15. They didn't call themselves a club. They called themselves a unit. Emma brought in Jack once to talk about mental armor. He spoke not as a soldier, but as a man who had carried too many heavy things and learned how to set some of them down. One day Nora raised her hand and said, "We should do something for the whole school. A campaign or something to show that being kind doesn't mean being weak." Emma thought about it. Then she smiled. "What if we ran a week of mini-missions?" She said, "Acts of courage, kindness, and protection." They called it Operation Stand Tall. Each day had a theme, like Shield Someone, where students were encouraged to defend someone else from rumors or insults. Or Quiet Strength, where students wrote anonymous notes of encouragement and slipped them into lockers. By Friday, the school felt different. Even the bullies had started to go silent, not because someone told them to, but because their power was slowly disappearing. Emma stood by the window after the final day. Snow fell softly outside again. She held a folder of student letters, notes thanking her, telling her they felt safe for the first time. Jack walked in and saw the way she was holding them. "Feels heavier than any medal, doesn't it?" He said. Emma nodded. "Because it matters more," she whispered. But not everything was perfect. One night Emma had a nightmare. She was back in the mud. But this time no one was laughing. She was alone, frozen. She woke up with a jolt. Breathing hard, Jack rushed in. She buried her face in his chest. "I thought I was past this," she whispered. Jack held her tightly. "No warrior ever forgets the battlefield," he said. "They just learn how to keep walking." Later, she sat alone, wrapped in a blanket. She took out her journal and wrote 5 words across a blank page. "Pain is not my anchor." The next day, she shared it with the unit, not with tears, but with strength. Because leadership, she realized, wasn't about never falling. It was about standing anyway. Weeks passed. The local newspaper did a feature on Emma and the student unit. The headline read, "From Mud to Mentor, How One Teen Changed a School." Emma blushed when she saw it. Jack cut it out and framed it, but not for the living room. He placed it beside his SEAL medals because to him, it was just as honorable. One evening, Emma stood in front of a mirror. She wore a plain black hoodie and her compass necklace. In her hand was the very first patch Jack ever gave her. She smiled at her reflection, not because she liked what she saw, but because she finally understood it. She was no longer the girl thrown into the mud. She was the one who reached out her hand to pull others up. And when people asked who taught her to fight, she'd tell them, it wasn't just her dad. It was the pain, the silence, the choice to rise again, and now, the legacy was no longer just Jack's, it was hers, carried in her hands, worn with quiet pride, a warrior, a protector, a voice for the unseen, and the story, her story, was only just beginning.